Mentally strong against all odds. As you heard, I have lost 3 children over the course of 17 years, and I'm still standing. If anybody in this room is a parent, you know that that is mental strength. I'm turning my pain into purpose with the things that I'm doing, writing, doing workshops, teaching about mental strength. But today I've chosen to read from my personal story. And I chose a very vulnerable piece, so I might cry. But just to set the stage, it starts in our family reunion in Kentucky. I've adopted 5 children. I have 2 biological children. The 5 children were raised in the foster care system in Miami, so they're city kids. They've never been in the country. And this is how it starts. The bright sun woke us early the next morning, and we loaded about 10 people in a stack of tubes into the back of a pickup truck that was headed towards the river. The rubber tubes jostled as we drove along. My cousin Stephen, always a prominent figure at the reunion, led the charge. It just wouldn't be the same without Stephen. We would often go rock climbing and be on adventures. I remember rappelling down huge waterfalls with him, laughing until it hurt. Stephen was the life of the party, always fun to be with and really active. This reunion was no different. The lazy afternoon was spent relaxing by the river, keeping an eye on the kids. Reggie and Maya were laughing and splashing in the shallows of the water's edge. The kids all really seemed to be enjoying themselves. Christina and Kayla were catching some sun on the sandy banks. Their big brother Johnny was bonding and swimming with his newfound cousins. Johnny wasn't a very strong swimmer, so I insisted that he wore a life jacket, which probably didn't feel very cool for a teenage boy. The eddy hole, as we called it, was a section of the river where we always swam. It was wide and very deep. An eddy in an area of a river is where the water slows down and creates a circular current that makes the water seem very still. When I was a child, I heard colorful stories about how endless the eddy hole was. The way it was told to me, no one had ever been able to reach the bottom. The older folks often teased us, saying, "Be careful, don't go too deep. There are 300-pound catfish waiting for you in there." I could picture them, gray and ferocious, and knew for sure I didn't want to mess with them. It was all in good fun, because no one had ever gotten hurt at the eddy hole. Just a tiny bit tanner and a bit happier, we returned home from the first day on the river. It was another pleasant evening, intermingling with our big family on the lawn. I looked over at Maya. Her curls were bouncing as she laughed with Reggie, Christina, and Kayla, roasting marshmallows on fire. Johnny was stretched out on the lawn chair next to the other boys, downing a can of soda. Each wore wide smiles on their faces. I felt so thrilled that my children were having so much fun. Bundy and I discussed our plans for the next day. Since Bundy doesn't feel comfortable swimming, he decided he would stay at the house and relax. He would be much happier sitting on the porch with Reggie and the girls. Johnny wanted to hang out with the other boys at the eddy hole again, and I wanted to do something different. So Stephen and I arranged to go on a kayaking adventure. We would start about 2 miles upriver and kayak down to meet everyone at the eddy hole. We all had breakfast together before Stephen and I loaded up the kayaks and back in the pickup truck. I waved goodbye to Bundy, Christina, Kayla, Reggie, and Maya, who were sitting in the circle on the porch. The summer heat was sweltering, and I could hear the June bugs buzzing in the nearby grass. Johnny jumped into the back of a different pickup truck with his new friends, laughing and chatting it up. It was so good to see my boy relaxed and just being a typical teenager. For the moment, he had discarded his painfully shy exterior, which was wonderful to witness. I caught Johnny's eye and waved. His face lit up, and we waved back. The pickup truck was now overflowing with excited boys in rubber tubes. I saw Stephen's wife and another woman, the mother of the 2 boys, loading the front of the pickup truck with food and drinks for the day at the river. They would be supervising the rowdy boys. They all waved and drove off. It was a gorgeous day. I grinned as we navigated wooded roads, that we made the right decision after all. Kentucky was beautiful, and the kids and I were soaking it all in. Stephen knew this section of the river intimately, having spent most of his life hiking, swimming, and kayaking the Big South Fork. The sunlight seemed to be dancing on the water, reflecting on the trees on the opposite of the bank. The effect was magical, as it created a wash of sparkling light. Stephen turned to me and said, "We've missed you at the reunion, and we're glad you're here." I smiled, and I said, "It's good to be here." The truth was that I felt more content than I had in a while. I settled into the shallow seat of the kayak, and we pushed off from the bank. Our paddles splashed as we navigated the current, working our way downstream, surrounded by the beauty of nature. My mind drifted freely, resting on how blessed my life was. I had married a really good man who loved me. I had 7 beautiful children. I couldn't have asked for more. The sun was higher in the sky when I heard the growl of an engine. I scanned the area in an attempt to identify the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from the direction of a park ranger who stood on a large rock near the bank. "Get off the river," he shouted. Stephen frowned and shook his head. "Something's wrong. They don't do this." I wondered what could be happening. "Our family is downriver," yelled Stephen. "What's going on?" The ranger shrugged. We were probably about a mile from the eddy hole, but Stephen immediately broke out into a run. A sense of dread hung thick in the air. "Wait here, I'll send someone back for you," Stephen called out. I passed the time biting my nails, fidgeting with my hands for what seemed like forever, until my Uncle Alan came to me in the truck. "I don't know how to tell you this, Christy, but Johnny's gone missing." "What do you mean missing?" I rattled off several rapid-fire questions until Alan responded with the most painful thing I'd ever heard. "They told me he was trying to swim across the river with the rest of the boys. He started struggling. He went under before anyone could get close enough to help him." "What? That could not be true." Tears welled up in my eyes and my heart nearly pounded out of my chest. "Not Johnny. No. We were just getting to know him, not the sweet boy who was just coming out of his shell." The panic engulfed me. My thoughts turned to his biological sisters, Christina and Kayla. "I've got to get to the girls. Surely Johnny would have worn his life jacket before crossing the river." I prayed that he had put his life jacket on. I flew out of the truck and ran to the bank to see what was happening. It was worse than I had ever imagined. There were rescue divers in the water and paramedics everywhere. The intensity seemed to be increasing. They hadn't found him yet. "Please find Johnny," I prayed. "Please find him." I'm looking everywhere, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, to see some sort of sign. "Come on, Johnny, please." Before long, Bundy and the girls joined me on the bank. We huddled together, crying in desperate heap. Stephen was still diving, searching frantically for Johnny in the bottomless depths. I knew Stephen. He wasn't going to give up. He just kept dying and kept trying. "Please find Johnny, Stephen. Please find Johnny." My mind became flooded with stories about how deep that spot was. And now no one had ever been to the bottom. "Please don't be at the bottom, Johnny." Bundy was terrified. But even in this seemingly hopeless moment, he just kept praying. I continued to stare into the light brown water, desperately trying to see through the murk and hoping to see Johnny. Try as I might, I couldn't see through it. I knew that Stephen and the other divers were facing a very difficult task. I tried to remain hopeful, holding Christina and Kayla while Bundy prayed feverishly for his safe return. My hope eventually began to crumble. Against the reality of the situation, Johnny had disappeared underwater at least 20 minutes before I had arrived. As a nurse, I didn't like the math. I knew that such a long amount of time really limited Johnny's chances of survival, even if they could locate him. It began to sink in that they might never find Johnny. I might never share another laugh or smile with him or watch him grow up. I might not witness his many joys and triumphs. I couldn't believe this could be happening. On what meant to be a fun family trip. Why? It didn't make any sense. I looked over at the girls. After all, they had already been through so much. This seemed so terribly unfair. I had promised them that they would be safe, the three siblings. We shivered on the bank for many hours, until one of the divers finally found Johnny. The diver emerged from the water, holding Johnny's lifeless body. The sight was surreal. I stepped outside myself. I could see the whole scene unfolding. The pain was too much. I just couldn't believe that God had allowed this. How could he do this to us, particularly Christina and Kayla? Hadn't they already had enough adversity? This was a searing bolt from out of the blue. And we just had to feel it. We had to live it. We headed home shortly after. We were all on the road, without Johnny. I could not fathom it. Johnny was not coming home with us today or ever. I didn't cry that much. But now that I've cried in front of you all, we're friends. So just
Thank you so much.